I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, "No, no, 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 we're going to do this." And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
What the hell is going on in Ukraine? Some newspapers say Ukraine's winning. Some say Russia's winning. Some say soldiers are surrendering left and right. I want to know what's going on with the economic sanctions. Are they working? Is there anything we're doing at all that's working? I feel like nothing is making sense when I read about it in the newspaper or TV or whatever. So I always do what I always do, which is go directly to the source. The best news source I know on anything defense related or military related is Brandon Webb, who runs softrep.com. Here's Brandon Webb to give me the download on Ukraine.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show.
So, Brandon, you're the CEO of the largest website on the planet for like real military intelligence news. And to get real news is so hard these days. Like it's, depending on which, whether you read the Jeff Bezos newsletter, AKA the Washington Post, or you read the Carlos Slim newsletter, AKA the New York Times, or whatever other outlets are out there, everybody's politically motivated. So I honestly feel I don't get any real news about what is happening in Russia, Ukraine, and other situations, but that's obviously the most important one in the world right now. You've been to Ukraine, you know a ton of people there. Of course, you've been on before. You were a huge Navy SEAL. You started the sniper school. You've written military thrillers. You have contacts in every country in the world. What the hell's going on in Ukraine? We'll start with that.
Yeah. So I wrote a piece 2 weeks ago, really, outlining the situation in Ukraine, which be glad to answer the question. But the piece I wrote was how the Western media, I really think you did a great job summing it up, right? The media in America is really hard to trust. And it's turned into just something that's kind of nasty. Everyone's doing these clickbait headlines because they want that increased advertising revenue from these programmatic buys. So if you write a very sensationalist title, it goes viral and the newspaper makes more money. But
Putin targeting Chernobyl-style disaster in Kiev.
Yeah, exactly. And my point was, if you look at, there's been a few instances in history where journalists have misstepped and got something terribly wrong, and people have been killed over it. Like riots have erupted. And so when I see, even an outlet like The Economist, which I used to like The Economist, but even they've kind of, in my opinion, have got into this kind of like clickbaity headline. They're taunting Putin, and everyone's just like, we need to arm Ukraine, we need to put more weapons and more of this, and then they're publicly like humiliating Putin at every misstep. I'm like, guys, if you paint this guy into a corner, one person makes the decision in Russia. It's Vladimir Putin. He's probably one of the most powerful men in the world because of that. It's one guy. He decides he wants to go into Ukraine. He's going into Ukraine to invade. And so my concern was, we need to really put pressure on the news media institutions to act more responsibly, because they could push us to the brink of nuclear war. And this is,
I agree.
Everyone's like, oh, that'll never happen. I'm like, I told you I have my friend Andre, who owns one of the largest advertising agencies in Ukraine called Fedorov Agency. And I talked to him on the summer of 2000, what was it? Summer of 21. We were on a rooftop in Kiev at the Hotel Bursa. And it's like their version of the Ace Hotel. And I said, we've been through SOFREP, we've been covering this kind of existing conflict. There's always been tension on that eastern border of Ukraine and Russia, like in the Donbass region. Like it's been this kind of like almost like a demilitarized zone, like a DMZ, right, between the Russians and Ukrainians. And I said, look, he just annexed Crimea. Nobody gave a hell about that. It was just like a blip in the media. And all of a sudden Putin's got Crimea, which is strategically important because it's on the sea and there's a base there. I said, are you worried that Putin could invade Ukraine? And he's like, oh, that's crazy. That'll never happen. And then he calls me, I was in Zurich in January of 2022, earlier this year. And he's like, oh crap. He's like, this is when all the stuff was happening. They were mobilizing troops in Belarus and all these like whispers of, something's going to happen. And the American embassy had just, I think, told everyone to pull out. Like, if you're an American in Ukraine, you should get out. And that's when Andre called me and he's like, hey, should I get my family out of here? And I said, look, I think if you have the resources, yes, you should for sure. Because worst case, they're on a month and a half holiday in the Netherlands. That's where he wanted to take his family, in the Netherlands. So he listened to me, moved his entire family out. And I think a week or two after, Putin invaded Ukraine. But this is a guy that had invested millions of dollars in a very cool co-working space in downtown Kiev called the Cooperative. He had his agency there, built a house in the countryside, had just invested in a new penthouse condo in Kiev, like millions and millions of dollars. And he's like, Brandon, I don't know what to say. I love my country, but I don't think I'm ever going to recoup that in my lifetime. So, but anyway, the point is, no one believed that Russia would invade Ukraine. And people have the same mindset, I feel like, with this nuclear war. And when you understand Putin's mindset and you really take an objective look at it, which again, the Western media, you just never see this stuff anymore in modern journalism, let's take a look at this kind of big picture, geopolitical picture. Because Putin really, in many ways, I think America has radicalized Putin because we've occupied Afghanistan 20 years. We destabilized the Northern Arabian Gulf, which kind of kicked off the rise of ISIS and the civil war in Syria, which, again, very important strategic base that Russia has in Syria. So Putin's not going to let Assad get out of power.
Let me just translate one thing, though. When you say radical, we changed the situation in Northern Arabian area. That's because of our invasion of Iraq and subsequent more or less failure there made Iran, Iraq used to balance Iran. Now Iran is the major powerhouse in the Middle East because they have no more natural enemy because we took down the natural enemy.
Yeah, 100%. And at one point, America was funding Saddam Hussein against that Iraq-Iran war, right? So We went, we helped overthrow Gaddafi in Libya. Libya is still a failed state. We basically run around the world and caused, at the heart of American foreign policy is to promote freedom and democracy in the world. And all we've done is just gone around and kind of failed to nation build and destabilize these regions. And so Putin is looking at us like, who the hell are you to tell me what to do? You guys have been creating a mess for over 20 years. And a lot of the reading I've done, like what really disturbed him was when we just decided on a whim to kind of essentially execute Gaddafi in Libya. And so now, you see a situation politically in America where we're divided as a country politically, right? Either you're voting for Republican or Democrat, and we've got this two-party system that really doesn't work. It just gives us really bad choices every 4 years. And I would highlight that with, I don't think Biden and Trump are the best that America has to offer in the form of like leaders. Right. And so Putin he sees this and goes, okay, I'm going to go into Ukraine because America is really not in a position to like, they don't have the stomach for it. And he's right. And so that's where I think he was emboldened to go into Ukraine. And so
why does he want Ukraine? I'm just, why do you think he wants Ukraine?
I think he wants Ukraine if you look at his kind of strategy, it's really, that it's all about Mother Russia. Like we're going to become, and I think why Putin was respected by many Russians for many years, and I think that's changed radically with the unpopular invasion of Ukraine, is that he brought, in a very similar way that Hitler did to Germany, he restored this kind of national Russian pride after the fall of the Soviet Union, after the breakup of the Soviet Union. And so that existed for a while. And I think, okay, he's a guy he's getting to the point and that age. I think Putin is in his 70s, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. But he's thinking legacy, right? This is one guy like Xi Jinping in China, and Putin probably has more autonomy than Xi, but he gets to make whatever decisions he wants. And he's thinking, this is my legacy play. I'm going to restore Russia to its greatness that it once was. I think that his ego had a lot to do with it. And again, there's not a lot of checks and balances in Russia. And so he went in, and I think he made a terrible mistake. And now he's trying to balance, he's not a dumb guy. He's probably going, okay, how do I get myself out of this one? And the original reason I wrote this piece was because I feel like who in the America or the European Union is really who's pushing for a peaceful diplomatic resolution? No, there's all this like banter about arming, more arms in Ukraine, more this, more that. And then the media is just dogpiling on. And I'm like, you guys are going to paint him into a corner, and he could for sure drop a tactical nuke on Kiev. And if you just run that thought experiment, like if Kiev had a nuke dropped on it tomorrow, just flatten the entire capital, what would happen? What would the world do? I don't think America launches a nuclear counterstrike. It puts us in a really bad situation. And what I think would happen is Europe, the European Union, the UK, which is a total mess right now with the prime minister just resigning, and America would bend a knee. They'd bend a knee to Putin and go, what do you need to end this?
Okay, so but this brings to light a bunch of questions. Like, if Putin wants Ukraine, why would he nuke the place he wants? Like, he's going to move into a country that obviously everybody would hate him forever, and there wouldn't be, Kiev is the main center of Ukraine. I'm just playing the devil's advocate. Like, would he nuke the place that he's going to move into? Like, would you nuke the house that you're about to move into?
I don't think it's his first choice, but when you look at, we were having that conversation before the podcast about people getting emotional playing chess. Yeah. If you push him to a point where he has an emotional reaction and he just basically says, screw it, freaking nuke them. And if that's the only way he sees as his opportunity to claim victory, then he'll take it. Because he'll say, look, we leveled them and we'll rebuild. That's why he also flattened those cities in eastern Ukraine with the idea that just wipe them out and rebuild it up as Russian. So I don't think it's first choice, but Elon Musk was saying, look, the probability is going up every day that he could use nuclear weapons. And I just think we should take it much more serious. And right. as consumers of news media content, people do really have the power. Let's not get outraged over, plastic straws, and now we're putting paper straws into plastic cups, and there's plastic is a big problem. But nuclear war is a big deal. Like, I don't think anybody in the world gains by having
podcast. Nuclear war is a big deal. But let me ask you this: like, from the beginning of this war, there really is two problems. Like you mentioned with the media, but one problem is I don't know who's winning or losing. Like every other day, it seems like, well, Ukraine just captured 15,000 soldiers. Every Russian is surrendering to Ukraine. But then on the other hand, I'm reading Russia just rain showered missiles down on Kiev and everybody's on the run. Like what's the strategic situation there? And then I have a follow-up question to that.
Sure. So the situation is Ukraine is kicking their ass. Like they have better weapons, like better defense tech, better everything. The only thing that they don't have is, and really they don't have air superiority, but Russia hasn't really established air superiority either, because we've given, the West has given Ukraine a lot of good ground to air defense missiles. But Ukraine is highly motivated. They've had a taste of freedom. They recognize their independence, and they don't want to go back to they don't want to be a part of Russia. So you have this very polarized population in Ukraine that is very motivated, similar to the war in Vietnam, right? It's why we lost the war. The other thing that's interesting, historically, an invading force needs at least a 3-to-1 ratio of like troops to troops, right? So Russia was kind of 1-to-1, and I read the estimate somewhere between 20 and 80,000 Russian soldiers have died during this conflict. And to put that into perspective, I think like between 20 years of Afghanistan, I don't think we lost more than 10,000 US troops. So, 20 to 80,000, that's a big number in such a short period of time.
Why is that happening? Because it's not like Russia is the new kid on the block. Like they know how to run an army. I think what happened is they had a lot of their command leadership in Syria, kind of managing that Syria civil war. They went in half-cocked to Ukraine and just got their butts handed to them. And the problem with Russia is nobody wants to fight in Ukraine. Like that's a big problem. It's exactly like the Vietnam War in America. Nobody wanted to be there. They're like, why are we here? This sucks. It's terrible conditions. Why are we doing this? And that's the same situation that exists now for Russia, and why there was this outrage over the kind of call up of another 200 to 300,000 troops, because Putin's like, oh, he recognizes that they've got big problems. Now they've reassigned one of the generals from Syria to handle the Ukraine situation. So it's not pretty for Russia. And one of the things they have, they've got the missiles, and you've seen they did that major strike against Ukraine, and it basically knocked out 30% of their energy infrastructure. And that's kind of like, that's what they can do. And the nuclear bomb is kind of like in that or the ace up the sleeve as well. And that's what's a scary scenario for me, and why I think we should really, what's shocking to me is even Biden, like, how come Biden's not like, look, we need to have a dialogue. We need to have a dialogue with Putin, because the Cuban Missile Crisis was an incredibly well-handled situation by John F. Kennedy. I did a case study on it at Harvard Business School, and
but you had this open dialogue between the Russians.
Was there an open
and
dialogue? I didn't know that. Like,
yeah.
Who,
No, there
who
was
talking to who?
They had a direct line between Russia and the U.S. That was like the beginning of their negotiation. Like, hey, look, let's have a direct, open line between the two countries, and have this like open dialogue. And now it's, the open dialogue's not there. No Western leader is kind of calling for a diplomatic solution. It's just all this saber rattling in the political arena and the press around arming Ukraine and this and that, and then kind of like making fun of Putin for these losses. And I'm like, guys, this is serious stuff. And I think it's a terrible thing to think about, but it could happen.
Yeah, let me ask you this. Like, even right in the beginning, after a few days, it was pretty clear this wasn't going to be a wipeout, and this was going to be an extended affair, and nobody wanted that. Like, obviously, Ukraine didn't want it, but Russia didn't want it either. Like, Putin didn't want an extended war with all the international hatred and sanctions and all this stuff. Like, it became much bigger than he wanted. But
yeah.
One thing that surprised me is that we never really discussed, like, we had so much hate for him, whether correctly or incorrectly. Like, let's just even assume it was correct. But no one ever discussed in the media or in politics, it seems to me, how he could save face. Because obviously he can't just pull out and say, oh, we lost, I'm sorry. Like,
yeah.
He's not going to admit defeat. But how could he have saved face in the beginning? How can he save face now to have a soft landing to this?
I think, look, if I was president, I would say, look, okay, we're gonna have a sit down, Zelensky, Putin, have some summit, right? Like, we're gonna talk about this. And
but Putin was supposedly refusing those sit downs.
Yeah, but he's signaling. If you watch some of the recent press, he signaled that he would. I've watched a lot of the foreign media, that he would be open to these talks, and I hope that through back channels that's starting to happen, that dialogue is opening up. But to answer your question, for Putin, if I was gonna predict what was gonna happen, I think that eventually China puts pressure on him to kind of get to the negotiating table. He takes maybe not all 4 of those territories he annexed, but part of them. He ends up getting that, which are, in reality, a lot of that eastern part of Ukraine it's so close to Russia that a lot of them probably consider themselves Russian anyway.
Right.
I think symbolically it's more important to Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, than anything. But I think Putin gets some of those territories. He gets some assurances about, okay, you're not going to put your missiles here, even though these other countries like Finland are now petitioning to join NATO because of what happened with Ukraine. I think that's kind of like a face-saving off-ramp for Putin, where he gets some territories. He goes, okay, we got this. We're, but that's kind of like in the ballpark of what happens. And I think the war goes on another 6 to 12 months, and it's tragic because the Ukrainian people are suffering, and a lot of these kids are getting sent to the front lines in Russia, just getting slaughtered. No training, like a week of marching around, and they get sent to the front line.
So does everyone, like even Zelensky, he needs to save face too. So like,
yeah,
does everybody save face if they say, listen, we'll give you Crimea with no arguments. Like, it's been an argument for 10 years. We'll just give it to you. And Finland and whatever, they can't join NATO. Like, NATO is fixed for the next 5 years at least. Well, and Ukraine's not going to join NATO either. But we will defend Ukraine with arms if you ever invade them again.
Something like that.
And we'll remove all sanctions and whatever. Like, will that save Zelensky's face? Will that save Biden? Will that save Putin?
I think so. Something like that, where everybody loses a little bit, but at the end of the day, Ukraine maintains its sovereignty. And look, I think Ukraine is coming out of this much stronger. Everybody knows about Ukraine in the world now, which not too many people knew before. They're going to be in a much stronger position.
And maybe
And
even Ukraine and Russia could form their own trade zone like the EU, so that
yeah,
people could flow across borders easily without a passport, and maybe there's a better trade deal between them, and then they could jointly sell things like wheat and whatever other resources they have. Like there's probably good ways for them to even shake hands. But now is there
yeah.
hatred in Ukraine because a lot of Ukrainians have died.
Yeah, no, there is no love lost for the Russians. That's for sure.
But I guess it's not for the Russian people. It's just for Putin. So if they could
Yeah,
just shake hands and the world continues and it's safer, gosh, that would be such a great thing. And also that solves part of the problem of the world economy is that we're not getting our carbs shipped to us anymore because all the wheat's coming from Ukraine and Russia.
yeah. Actually, I took a pasta making class in Lisbon, and this little Italian girl running the class, she actually brought it up to me. She said we were having a coffee after the gnocchi class, and she said, "Yeah, I'm really worried because Italy gets most of its wheat from Ukraine to make our pasta." And that's when I first started going, okay, this is months ago. I was like, okay, there's going to be a food crisis.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get 2 memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply. Whether it's Ukraine, Russia, or China. I mean, China makes so much of our product, whether it's clothes, furniture, 98% of our antibiotics. Like if we ever put sanctions against China, let's say if China invades Taiwan, and Biden's already said we're going to put troops in Taiwan, which seems insane to me. But China could just say, hey, sorry, we're a month late on all of your antibiotics. Good luck if you have an infection on your arm or whatever. You're just going to die.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a good point that you make to kind of highlight the importance of these trade relationships. Because we're such a large trade partner with China, it almost puts a check and balance in place, right? Like we can't afford to really go into a full-scale conflict with China because we rely on each other so much as trade partners. So, and I think that's a good thing.
So why is then the Biden's rhetoric essentially? And look, I'm not criticizing Biden. I actually know people on his team. He's got a strong bench, and just like I know top Republicans. So I'm usually very neutral on these things, and I think you can easily call them the Republicrats because largely, except for a few issues, they sort of operate the same way. But why are we taking such almost a warmongering rhetoric now, particularly against China, where we get so much of a lot of the inflation that we're having right now is related to our supply chain relationships with Russia and China.
Yeah.
Why are we doing this?
I don't know. And look, what concerns me as a veteran, like I've fought in Afghanistan and Iraq, and only when I was out, when I left the military in 2006, I really started seeing things from a different perspective, because when you're in, you just kind of, okay, I have my orders and I don't care who's in charge. The commander-in-chief is commander-in-chief. We do our job and put our head down. But once I'm out, I'm like thinking like, okay, what are we doing? Like what? And especially Afghanistan was a soft spot or a sore spot for me, because I had a lot of friends in 2010 that would tell me, they're like, we don't know why we're here. These rules of engagements are crazy. We're coming back from a mission, like shots fired and getting interrogated by our own NCIS, who are on our side interrogating, SEAL team members. Why did you shoot this guy? Why did that guy get shot? It's like no way to fight a war. And like, I feel like Americans, like we really need to hit the reset button on our foreign policy strategy and come up with something new for a new world, right? It's a globally connected world. We really should spend some time in thinking, what is our foreign policy strategy? And I would like to know, because I don't know anybody. You and I could probably sit in a room with the entire House of Representatives and ask each one, and we'd get a different answer. And so when no one knows the strategy, that's a big problem.
Well, it's so interesting because this kind of speaks to the fact of like political discourse in this country. Like, I don't know if it's, and I it's an easy thing to say they're all just stupid, because I don't think that's true. But like when I've been watching a lot of the debates in the local races, whether it's, you know, the local race in Georgia or Ohio or Florida or whatever. And when people ask about inflation, nobody says what is kind of the obvious truth to everybody, which is that, okay, you know, the Federal Reserve has a lot to do with inflation, as does the supply chain issues with China and Russia. Instead, I hear one party saying, oh, it's the evil corporations making a lot of profits, or it's the, you know, we're not allowed to drill anywhere. But like, okay, those are sort of non-issues. Those are like fringes of the inflation question. So it's sort of like even the political discourse is not allowed to speak about the truth. I don't know what the story is. They get their talking points and the truth is never part of it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think American politics needs to have a total makeover. Like, we need to modernize the American political system. Yeah, get rid of, I've thought about this for a long time. We need to get rid of this like two-party duopoly. Everyone should be able to vote by phone. You know, if we have the most sensitive information in our bank accounts on our phones, we can't vote by phone.
Right, and you're right. In fact, the fact that we can't vote by phone is causing the problems. Like a box of votes is just dropped off at 3 a.m. and like they all shake down to the floor and everyone picks them up and counts them. Like it's an antique system. It's a system from like the 1820s. It's
totally antique. The other thing, you know, put a cap on campaign finance so you can't buy an election, and then get rid of the gerrymandering. And then the last thing I would do, I really think extending the presidential term to like a flat 8-year term would be much better than the current system, because we're so short-sighted as a country and things happen. Like, if somebody was president for 8 years, I think we'd really think long and hard about who this candidate is going to be, for one. And also it gives them time to actually roll up their sleeves and not have to worry. They have no worry about getting reelected, because 2 years into a 4-year term, you're already running this, you know, second campaign. It's like, you can really roll up your sleeves and like start thinking about, okay, how can I really make this country better and do good for America if you have an 8-year term? Because Russia and China, with like Putin and Xi Jinping, can just wait us out. They just wait us out till Trump gets out and then Biden's in. But that's like, you know, I think I'm with you. Like, I don't know. I think it's because of the short-sightedness, and they're trying to get these quick campaign bites in there, and they know what resonates with their base, that we're stuck in this like, oh, we gotta drill in America, made in America. You know, it's like guys.
I mean, you and I are similar ages and have lived through in our adult lives similar problems. Like, you know, 9/11 was kind of the first serious international issue we faced. But before that, even though there was the Berlin Wall dropping and there was kind of this real or artificial peace for a long time, but then there was the Asian default crisis in the mid to late 90s was like the biggest issue. But then there was 9/11, then there was the financial crisis. Now there's been, you know, obviously Russia, Ukraine, and we had COVID. So we've seen through a lot. And I'm an optimistic person. Even in the middle of a financial crisis, I was going on CNBC and they hated me for it. I was a huge optimist and I was correct, but nobody wanted to hear it. But I am legitimately, I don't want to say a pessimist, but I am legitimately nervous now, because it seems like no one knows what they're doing and they don't care. Yeah. I have 5 children that are draft age, and I'm not a believer in any kind of war at all, because people die, both good and bad people die. And I'm nervous because again, in the financial crisis, I sort of saw what was going to happen, that they would, you know, fix what was wrong in the banking system. Companies were still doing well and things would get back to normal, even if it looked like capitalism was on the brink. It wasn't. And with COVID, I was nervous also that the shutdown of the economy, it would have ramifications that we won't know for years, which is still true, but we did come out of it fairly okay. But this situation, and then even worse, China, Taiwan, which is kind of, China is looking at this while they're planning Taiwan. And, I've had General Robert Spalding came on the podcast. He was the top White House official for Chinese affairs. He's convinced China's going to invade Taiwan literally like any day or any month. And I've had other people tell me that means World War III. And then you see Biden saying we're going to put troops in Taiwan. We don't even have diplomatic relations with Taiwan. And so I am, I wake up a little scared. And what do you think? Well, what after all of this, like, we've touched on a range of issues. What do you think will happen?
So look, I share the same sentiment. I have kids and as well, and they're, high school and college, but I have the same fears. It's why I wrote that article about kind of calling out Western media and the political leadership in the West for not taking a more measured approach to what's happening in Ukraine.
But they can't, because it's their jobs to just scare people. Like I've worked in newsrooms. You run a newsroom, and I know yours is a lot different than the New York Times, but literally newsrooms will say every morning, what's the scariest thing we could write about? Let's even use hyperbole and get subscribers. Like that's all they care. So their job now is not news. Like you have to really go to the source for news, which is why I'm going to you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And it's one of the things I'm in my alumni group at HBS and the YPO group, and we're having these conversations amongst ourselves. Like, okay, we can't rely on government to solve these problems anymore. So it takes thought leaders. It takes podcasts like this and people kind of making a difference to kind of make these, push us in the direction of becoming a better country, because I think America is in big trouble right now as well. And the world is, I've never thought we would be on the brink of World War III, which it scarily seems like that every day. You wake up and read the headlines. I think China and America is going to sort it out. And look, the Taiwan is almost a non-issue to me, because Taiwan is China's number one trade partner, far out, even though the U.S. is number two, they're much larger. So,
I didn't know that.
Economically speaking, Taiwan is tied to China. When they had the revolution in the 50s, guess where all the old political leadership ran to from China, mainland China? They all went to Taiwan. Sure. And so there's a similar sentiment with Russia that goes, okay, at one point in time, Ukraine was part of the USSR, so they feel like it's ours. They feel like this ownership. And China is similar with Taiwan. They're like, okay, your time is coming. Like you're all, they all speak Mandarin. That's the official language. The trade relationship with China is massive, way bigger than the US. And you got to think like they share a home tongue with all the trade going on. Like if I'm running the intelligence service for the Chinese, they probably control Taiwan already. Like we just don't know it.
But then why is this even a discussion that China's probably going to invade Taiwan?
I feel like it's just like a political hot point. It's just, even though,
because she's thinking of a legacy too.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm like, I think Taiwan, like, in all reality, does America care if China takes Taiwan tomorrow? It would be just like Crimea and Putin. They would be like, who cares?
But then why does Biden even say things like, oh, we're going to put troops in Taiwan? That is so counter to what would be good for America.
I know.
I'm not saying China's good, Taiwan's bad, or Taiwan's good, China's bad. I'm just saying it doesn't make any sense for our citizens.
No, why were we in Afghanistan for 20 years? We accomplished our objective at the mid part of 2002. Yeah. We should have just left. Why did we stay 20 years? It's just it doesn't make sense to me. And that's why, when I read these headlines and I see the sound bites from both sides, because I'm with you, I'm just fed up with the whole system in general.
Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and or cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. This is such a valuable service for all business owners, big businesses, small businesses, doesn't matter. I wish I had this in the many different businesses that I've started. Sometimes it seems like your business is humming, but then suddenly you don't understand it. You're starting to fall behind. You're not understanding where your costs are, where your revenues are, where your payments are. Teams are buried in all sorts of like BS work, and you can't seem to close the books. So you need like one dashboard, one source of truth. I'm jealous of this business, NetSuite from Oracle, of course, NetSuite by Oracle. I wish I'd come up with this idea. It's a brilliant concept to have all your business intelligence on one dashboard. This is why you need to know these three numbers: 37,000, 25, and 1. So 37,000, that's the number of businesses which have upgraded to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, streamlining accounting, financial management, inventory, HR, and more. 25. NetSuite turns 25 this year. That's 25 years of helping businesses do more with less, close their books in days, not weeks, and drive down costs. 1, because your business is one of a kind. So you get a customized solution for all of your key performance indicators, your KPIs, in one efficient system with one source of truth. Manage risk, get reliable forecasts, and improve margins. Everything you need to grow all in one place. So right now, download NetSuite's popular KPI checklist designed to give you consistently excellent performance absolutely free at netsuite.com/James. That's netsuite.com/James to get your own KPI checklist. netsuite.com/James. Given all this, given that there does seem to be either a range of stupidity or political motivation, what and we've already discussed, okay, here's how Putin can save face today, and we could just throw this out there and no one gets hurt. What do you think will happen based on all your contacts, all your connections, all your news sources? What do you think is going to happen?
I think the war goes 6 to 12 months more. I think eventually the Chinese could even take a leadership position and actually be out in front as the organizer of a peace talk. I think Russia gets some territories in the eastern part of Ukraine, and that's kind of Putin's saving face,
Sure.
and he can still claim victory. And I think what you intuitively said about the NATO and the armaments and all that stuff, it will probably include some of that. Like, okay, these countries, you can't put, missiles right up against the border of Russia. something like that, and then the war ends, and Ukraine gets to join the European Union, and will be much stronger for it. And I think that depending on how Putin navigates this, because of the economic sanctions, and not just the sanctions, like just looking at the energy alone, like the long-term effects are really going to do damage to the Russian economy, because they lost major trade partners, and you can't get that trust back overnight. When you look at how much trust, I mean, the nationalization of McDonald's in Russia, for instance, but things like this, I think Russia is in a really tough spot on the long term economically, regardless of if they stop the sanctions tomorrow. Europe's already gotten off the energy, right?
We'll only play devil's advocate to that, though, because they have no banking relationships anymore with the West. They've just stopped paying their debts, so they've saved hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars on debt repayments. And because the only people we were able to personally affect were all the Russian oligarchs that are competitive with Putin. Putin might actually love the sanctions, and he's just upped his oil trading with China. So I'm not so sure he's really lost that much money.
No, I think I agree with you in the short term that it's basically a non-issue, but long-term effects, it's going to be a major. There's going to be major problems. Plus, there's permanent changes to like European Union is getting off of Russian energy, right? Gas, and they're even though they're going to suffer in the short term, but eventually they're getting off that. They're not coming back, right? They're not going to go, oh, great, let's buy Russia's gas again, turn it back on. There's just this loss of trust, and
But where are they going to get gas?
I mean, they're going to have to invest in. They're going to have to get it somewhere else and invest in renewables, which I feel like the European Union's done a pretty good job of being very progressive on going that direction anyway.
Okay, so does Putin exactly save face with this then? How about part of the saving face is he denationalizes all the companies he nationalized, in exchange for, extensive, multi-decade contracts with them. Germany recommits to buying, Russian oil for so many years, because the switch to renewables isn't going to happen overnight anyway.
Yeah.
And maybe even they switch to EU for buying oil from Russia instead of dollars, euros. I'm just, again, trying to think of, not that we're trying to like placate Putin, but obviously if he doesn't save face, there's going to be a nuclear war, and we want him to leave Zelensky alone. And, I don't know, we got to save face too. So we don't want to act like we're giving him everything. So how do we message that we're not giving him everything?
Well, I mean, I feel like it's already past that point. Like Ukraine is sovereign. They will be sovereign. They're likely going to join the European Union, which that was the last thing Putin ever wanted, especially more countries joining NATO, which I think will happen also.
So maybe we say Ukraine's going to join the EU, but not NATO. Like we won't let Ukraine join NATO, but he has to agree not to invade them again.
I feel like those are realistic scenarios for sure. It's got to be some mix of that. And, let's just hope it doesn't escalate.
Does Russia pay reparations for anything they destroyed in Ukraine? Or is that not saving face for?
I think probably I think that can include reparations. And look, back to the motivation, right? Like I'm splitting my time between the US and Portugal now, and there's a ton of Ukrainian refugees in Portugal when I first started coming here. And even some of the women have went back to Ukraine because they feel this like national sense of pride, where the Russian population wants nothing to do with it. There's no motivation there. And especially the Russians have done terrible things. If the New York Times actually did put out a really good piece on, they intercepted all these cell phone audio transcripts and then they interpreted them. And the Russians are telling about how they've been ordered to massacre women and children. They're looting houses, stealing TVs. Like there's thousands and thousands of civilian bodies just massacred, left in this forest. Like it's really bad. So Russia's going to definitely have to answer for that in some form or fashion.
So how do they answer for that? And Putin also saving face? And also, how does Ukraine ever have any good feeling towards Russia again? I mean, it's always surprising to me that Japan loves the U.S., given that we dropped 2 nuclear bombs on them. But again, we didn't start the war with them. They started the war with us. I know there's argument around that, but I guess they justify it that way. But how does Ukraine ever have good feeling towards Russia ever again?
I think, and look, it's even more so than the US and Canada. There's a lot of cross-pollination in population between Russia and Ukraine. Like people in Russia have family in Ukraine, vice versa. I feel like most Ukrainian sentiment is channeled towards the negative sentiments channeled towards Putin. So, and that's a fact, kind of an X factor in itself. Like, I think that, a lot of the really smart people in business in Russia are seeing like, potentially the best thing is regime change, but how do you take out Putin? Who knows? But I think that there's enough relationship there that if eventually they'll get over it. I don't think Ukrainians harbor any ill will towards the Russian population is my point. They understand that it's one guy, inflicting his will on the population.
Raping the women though. Like, how do they, like if you have a daughter that was raped by a Russian soldier, how do you ever come to terms with that?
Yeah. I mean, that's a tough one. That's a tough one because and I would encourage anyone listening to go look at or listen to those cell phone conversations. It's pretty, you get the idea how bad the Russians have it. Half the conversations they're complaining they don't have ammunition, they don't have food, they don't know why they're there. No one's giving them orders. So it's pretty crazy. You kind of get a really good picture for why Russia is failing on that ground war in Ukraine. But yeah, how do you reconcile the atrocities? It's terrible. I just don't know. I mean, I feel like humans are pretty, look at what happened in World War II, right? And with Germany, we've like the atrocities at the concentration camps. We just kind of like realize the circumstances and we just move on with life.
I guess that's right. We do have a strong tendency to focus on the future because that's where the food is. The food is never in the past, it's in the future. And so maybe just biologically we forgive and forget, and it's hard to hold grudges at a national or a species level. But so to summarize then, you think it lasts 6 to 12 months more. But again, Ukraine's only so big. Like if they just keep bombing cities, is there anything left of Ukraine in 6 months?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, Ukraine is resilient. What I saw when I was in Kiev, less than a year ago, is a thriving entrepreneurial environment, startups, excitement. They were really, you could just feel it when you went there, like all the stuff that was happening. And they've got a taste of that freedom. And I think Ukraine, like I said, will be much stronger and bounce back very quickly because they're going to get a ton of support from the world, to rebuild. But again, I think it's, they've got 6 to 12 months more of this and a lot of suffering. A lot of people, unfortunately, going to die on both sides. And I just hope we can avoid the nuclear option.
And what will trigger the end? Like, will suddenly Biden say, look, guys, we got to stop this, or China steps in, or like what will actually trigger the end that where it's like, okay, done, let's just figure this out?
I mean, I think that it could even be Putin signaling when he realizes he's in a really tough spot, which I think he's not in a great spot right now. But if I had to call it, I would say that the Chinese take a leadership position where it feels like naturally to me, because China wants to be known as a superpower. And this could be their moment to kind of get on the global stage and say, hey, look, we're going to broker this peace. Like, this isn't good for anybody, especially coming out of COVID and now going into this recession. I think it comes from China. I just don't see any strong Western leadership, really angling to solve this problem. Yeah.
It's such a shame that not necessarily that the U.S. lost its leadership role in the world, because maybe we never should have had a leadership role to begin with, but the fact that we lost it because of our bad behavior, when I think legitimately most people in the US think and know that, look, it's a good thing, the system we have. We have a system that encourages innovation, encourages free thinking most of the time, not all the time. And it would be better if the world were like us. But
Yeah.
we've done a really bad job of like spreading that message with bullets. So,
Yeah.
and it's, it's a little messed up, but I hope it's less than 6 to 12 months, although you're probably right. And look, let's keep talking about this as it continues and as we learn more, because hopefully there's a soft landing for this, a soft landing for China, Taiwan. Hopefully, and this is all related to the U.S.'s inflation issues, which are reflected in the stock market every day. So hopefully the world starts to anticipate better things and life becomes good.
Yeah. Or AI gets to the point where they just make us their pets and then we can just, get a pat on the head and run in the
I'm
park
fine with
once a
that
day.
too.
Yeah,
I'm fine with that also.
Same here.
So,
I never thought I would say it, but I'm actually, the first time in my life, I'm like, probably AI could do a much better job governing the world.
Definitely. It's so funny. Like, on Notepad, we have an AI engine, and I typed in, let me see if I can find it. I typed in what are bad ideas for a podcast, I think was my thing. But then I ran it through the AI engine, and it's very weird what it came up with. It kind of had this really almost Marxist interpretation of what I was asking. So we're creating the better AI is. And look, AI is this one big Borg-like unit now. Like they all use the same training data. So let me just see. Okay, yeah. So I plugged in. So I had a business idea, not a business. I called this the bad idea of the day, which is to create a podcast family tree. So for instance, you've been on my podcast, I've been on yours. So on the podcast family tree, we're both children of each other. And, then let's say Jocko Willing's been on mine. So you're like cousins with Jocko Willing. And then whoever Jocko's had on his podcast, you're related to. So I wanted to create this huge podcast family tree so you could see who the common guests are or listen to the podcast and whatever. So I asked the AI we have an AI engine that will help you come up with more ideas. So I just said, give me ideas for a podcast family tree. So it had to figure out what I meant by a podcast family tree. And here's the idea it came up with, word for word. The title is The Family Tree of Bad Ideas. And then here's what it says. How capitalism is ruining our planet. In this podcast, we explore how capitalism is ruining our planet. We trace its origins back to its creator and see how it has spawned a new generation of terrible ideas. That was literally like the AI answer to, give me more ideas for the podcast family tree.
I wonder what it would say. Like, how do we end the war in Ukraine? I wonder what it would say.
Oh, okay. Hold on. If you have a minute, I will do that right now. So I have to create a new idea list.
We're using AI to write some content, but it's funny what it comes up with because the AI, a lot of the writing engines, it assumes that everything on the internet is truth. So the stuff that it references, I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. How to stop the war in Ukraine. AI suggestions. Establish a United Nations peacekeeping force, which would be responsible for maintaining peace and stability in the region and be composed of soldiers from various countries. All right. I feel like we've done and failed that before, but that's a reasonable idea. Yeah. Create a buffer zone. And this is a little what you were talking about. Buffer zone is a strip of land that separates two countries. This would create a physical barrier between Ukraine and Russia and would hopefully reduce the chances of conflict. So maybe inside that buffer zone on the Russia side is things like Crimea and so on. Sanctions, that's not working. Diplomatic relations,
non-existent almost.
Yeah. And military intervention. All right, AI, I'm not sure I like any of these ideas.
I know.
So humans still would make better generals and diplomats probably than AI. So there's that.
Until the one, it'll be 1 second and then they'll be so far ahead of us. But for now, that exists.
That's true. It grows exponentially. So, that's what happens. But Brandon Webb, you've been on so many times, always have valuable content. Check out softrep.com, which is your site of military. I always say military intelligence, but it's like
defense and foreign policy news.
Yeah. And also check out Brandon Webb's thrillers. Just search Brandon Webb, W-E-B-B, on Amazon. He's written some incredible military thrillers. It's a new genre created by Brandon. So, well, Tom Clancy, really, but continued by the new Tom Clancy, which is Brandon Webb. Are you allowed to talk about all the different ways you're pushing these thrillers? Can you just say what the highlights are?
In fact, Cold Fear, which is the second book in our Finn series, you could read them out of order. Cold Fear actually really has some of what we talked about with the Ukraine-Russia tension in there too, but it all takes place in Iceland, and it's a kind of military thriller / crime book as well. So that's our latest one. We're just in final contractual stages. So hopefully turn it into TV series on one of the big streamers. So I'm excited about that. And also I did put this on my Instagram. If anyone buys 2 or more books on the holidays, I'm going to do a cameo video for their gift recipient and email it to them. So if you buy,
are you on Cameo?
Books, no, but I'm just going to do the video and email it to the person. So that's, if they go to my Instagram, which is Brandon T. Webb, they'll see the offer there. But I limited it, but if you're an Altucher listener, I'll uncap the limited cameo. So I'll do as many as you got.
Excellent. Brandon, thanks so much again. And next week or the week after, whenever it is, I'll give you a chess lesson. If anyone wants to watch that live, we'll do it on Twitch. So just tell us on Twitter if you want to watch that live, and we'll Twitch it. And thanks again, Brandon. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
At Discount Tire, we know how valuable your time is around the holidays. Get 30% shorter average wait time when you buy and book online at discounttire.com, so you can spend more time with friends and family this holiday season. Discount Tire, let's get you taken care of.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley, with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.